Greetings and salutations. This is Jason Silverain, and today I'm returning to Arisen. Now, I covered this a very long time ago. I believe I did the playthrough of the prologue, which is essentially a free demo of the prologue to the game's story. It was very well presented. It's a beautiful game regardless of what I'm going to say today. It is one of the nicest looking visual novels I have seen. However, I can't recommend you buying it at all. It's a sad tale. This was developed and published by Homecoming Studio, and it was broken down into acts that needed to be updated. It's available for £14.99. The soundtrack is available for £4.55. I recommend buying the soundtrack. I don't recommend buying the game, because sadly, the game is just dead in the water. The indie development company went under and didn't even give a warning, no announcement or anything. And they've also kept inaccurate info on the store page. So you've still got people even now asking when it's going to be updated, which is just really bad policy. I'm not sure what the devs are doing now, but it's unlikely they're going to be doing anything more on Arisen anytime soon. But you've got two acts, and the first act is pretty decent. The prologue is probably the best written, the most polished of the lot, which is a little sad because it's also the shortest. And I feel that the demo had more options than the main game did in the prologue. Putting aside the unfinished story, there is numerous other issues with Arisen, sadly. For example, it has hardly any other options. It has Open Dyslexic font, which is very handy. I do appreciate that. It is on by default, which is a bit sad because it's a bit ugly, but I can understand why. And it has volume. There is no resolution options. There is no way to play this outside of full screen, and that is incredibly annoying, especially when it's just a visual novel. And also, each character you create has a single save file. You can have several characters, yes, but you can't just save at an earlier point, load, and go back to certain options. It is incredibly frustrating. And if it wasn't for me kind of abusing various elements of the save system, I would have had to go through this game 4 or 5 times and spend way more hours in it just to get a handful of achievements, especially since there's no skip option. So you have to read through all of the text again, even though you've already done all this. Now, gender doesn't really do too much in the game. Certain characters you meet, I think there's one lesbian, one gay, one transsexual who seems to prefer either gender, so probably bisexual. I think there's I think there's like some other bisexual characters, and then it's kind of vague. But the annoying thing is, I found that people were falling in love with me regardless. I was just trying to play as a friend, and this is where some of the features in the game sort of fall apart. Now, you have this card system, which is supposed to replace it's supposed to replace traditional choices in a text-based adventure or visual novel. And, well, it doesn't really do the role very well. When I first played it, I was quite impressed, and I saw how it would force you into certain choices to unlock certain cards. But the cards you unlock don't always make sense. For example, if you keep doing Rebellion, you unlock the Charisma card. But Charisma isn't really Charisma, it's more Intimidation. You mostly just threaten people with that card, which in most scenarios is the incorrect way of solving them. This is the problem. It gives you lots of options, but there's a very narrow way of solving each scenario positively. And you don't really feel like you're in a single story that's going through. It's more of like lots of disjointed scenes. So I'm going to click through this just to get to a choice section so you can see. But again, I feel like here we go. It opens up. What they should have had was numerous people in the background, just a background image with other people enslaved. And then, as you go through the journey and more people have died off, remove them. That would be a much stronger, visual image. But the descriptive writing's really good. I only found various spelling mistakes and typos pretty late into the game. And it really does like to throw its lore at you. But most of its characters are just far too nice and far too Mary Sue's in a way. Like this gentleman here, he is just like this amazing village chieftain with like gentle charisma who will just take care of you. Now what gets me is there's no like anger. Like you're trembling, you cannot hold back tears. And what this sort of forces you into is if you want to unlock certain other cards, you have to just keep using the same card over and over and over and over. And even then, the card it will unlock may not necessarily come up in a lot of choices, or will be really useless. For example, Joy card. This lets you take part in enjoying a thing. But it also, most of the time, has you gifting a character an item. But the card it unlocks is gift. Actually, or is it joke? I think it might be joke and then gift. But a lot of the times, joke is really unsuitable for the scenario. There's like this deadly serious scenario where if you do it wrong, you're in a lot of trouble. But you can still joke there. And again, it's reading the hints of how these work. And again, so yes, I just keep using sadness here. That will unlock compassion. Now, I do not know at this point whether I have to use that card a certain amount of times or if I have to use it at a certain choice, because it's really unclear. Because there's times I used Rebellion over and over and over and over again, and I didn't get Charisma till very late. So even though if I go to the journal and I show you the various cards, I think I only ever unlocked maybe like 1 or 2 cards for each of these options. I never unlocked the full set, even when I tried to, and just used that choice, even when it would be negative for my scenario. Also, here you have numerous NPCs who are basically the plot point NPCs, and as mentioned, there's a gay lizard man who is essentially a big ton of fun. You can meet him in various different ways. I do like how you get introduced to these people in different ways. But his main problem is he works for the army in a very homophobic society. If it wasn't for that he's a lizardman and they're essentially terrifying, he would probably be lynched. And at which point that does actually play into stories he has, because all of his people in the military are addicted to dragon blood, and the military just literally hands it out as a ration. And he starts getting like hyper aggressive and uncontrollable as they withdraw his ration for him, without telling him why, and it's because he's been basically trying to sleep with every other human. There is a shape-shifting lesbian werepanther who speaks obviously as someone with broken tongue in the area, who's foreign, who's very charming but has all the common sense of a toddler, really. And she's kind of fun. She's a nice one to befriend. I was disappointed midway through where I found out she wasn't a romanceable character. Then you've got your 2 different slave owners. One is a gentleman who is incredibly nice, overly friendly, and instantly wants to treat you like a servant. The other one is a much sterner woman who just seems to be more traditional, but she'll still treat you well because you're a useful, pawn. And then you get your fellow slave, who is much more rebellious, but then cools down after a while. And also this archmage, who is just like, screw the system, I'm going to mess with it. Who seems to be like one of the nicest characters originally, but when you read deeper into her, she's treating you like an interesting pet. And all the things that you need to help her with are highly illegal and could get you killed. And if you say no to them, she gets angry with you. So she's kind of a hypocrite. But I think one of the flaws to this story is you're doing a slavery story, and you give very little option to essentially rebel. You do get a handful of things where you go out of your way to mess around with things, But because how the story progresses is that you've become a special slave. Essentially, you become a special project because there's this big festival going on, and you are going to be presented to the king or the emperor. I think he's like emperor at this point. Um, you're going to be presented to him as a trophy piece of look how well I trained my slaves, and if you do really well enough, you're going to be freed. You'll be made into a citizen. So it sort of makes sense that you want to play it intelligently, behave yourself, and try and do that. But it kind of leaves out a lot of the whole point of being a slave. You're treated more like a serf. You are basically untouched by most people because you are your master's property, which is relatively accurate in some societies. But by having this, this preferential treatment and skipping over the training sections and the nasty bits, it kind of takes away from it all. And it kind of makes it very lackluster, especially when you have this very detailed, oh god, we've been enslaved start, with a lot of disturbing kind of description and, powerful language. Though, at the same time, I kept reading this and I realised, I swear they have looked at some actual real life descriptions of people from the slave ships and word for word some of them, of how it affected them. I'm sure I've seen some descriptions in museums about that I've just read practically identical to some of the phrases used. And with that, I need to take a pause. I'll be right back. Credit where his credit is due. As I've come into the scene, this reminded me of something I did want to talk about. Look at this background, that water animation. That is beautiful. Again, the lack of NPCs though, the lack of life in these scenes, makes a beautiful kind of background somewhat pointless and not as effective as it could have been. The sound though is very good. The use of audio in this game is fantastic, and I am 50-50 whether or not the soundtrack is worth it. There's a few songs in this which I would say are lovely. There's others, just ambient noises and some repetitive loops that it makes me feel like the soundtrack should probably be about half price. Now here's the Colosseum scene which I mentioned previously. Okay, they've picked up weapons. We're ready to fight. You're terrified. Let's go with ready to fight. Okay, everyone's accepting their destiny. They're about to face off against things. Comes back with a weapon. They're tense. They're angry. The chime gongs. The crowd yells, snarls, and pounds its feet like a monstrous beast. The sun blinding you. The heat hits you like a fist in your hand as a weapon. You no idea how you came by it. Everything is moving so fast. They're trying to really do that gladiator scene. There we go. So then you can choose like where you're going to fight. Supporting role, front line, or just avoid it. Fight in the front lines. You want to strike out, take the blows, and give as much as you take. Spectators are at fever pitch. They throw fishnet bags of food into the arena. And then you can either fight the other people for them, avoid them, or team up with others to get them. And then you've been wounded by the powerful swipe of a claw. It's like, it's so disjointed. And then it mentions there's a lion. There is no description of who you're fighting or anything like that. It lacks oomph. And then you can charge, and to be fair, there's very few ways you can die in this game. In fact, people get wounded all the time, and it just keep going. It's like, oh, you get cured later. They apply some salve to you. There we go. And it describes how they're coming in to get the carts and everything. And then, weirdly, after you've done all this, he gets taken away. And then you get taken to the slave pens to be sold. And it's really weird that they threw you straight into the arena, coming off the ship, giving you no food, barely any food and water, to go in the arena. And I think, in this society, they respect, like, martial prowess. And by throwing you to arena shows you're a worthy slave worth having. And it's through that little scene, that little bit in the Colosseum, the game picks who you're going to have as your prime owner. Good warrior, I know one when I see one. Fight me, you rush in headlong, give everything you've got. Best friend always told me it would cost me my life. Today, that wouldn't bother me. I can't believe we survived. You go, and he's like, now, live as a doesn't that make you up? You can agree, you can hold out your hand, because you've got the extra card option normally you'd only have. These two, but I agree. But there's no... At no point does it give you the chance to try and escape your predicament. There we go. We got charisma. That's the earliest I've managed to get it. And then we've done all this. We'd rather be died than being slaves. And there's a description of things going on. But no point during this next sequence do we get the choice to try and escape or attack these people. And it is ridiculous. It's like, I'm sure this was an option in the prologue game. Because you can die during the prologue game here by not basically being compliant. So, by being brave in the arena, let's see who's going to actually purchase me. And they're like... Then you start seeing that they'd rather enslave locals, because enslaving islanders, us, are essentially a pain in the ass. You know, so they have to learn everything. They will rebel. They will be unruly. They don't know our customs. They don't speak the language. And now humans might not speak Elven. Yeah, elves are just slaving gits in this world. Apart from the black elves, who are really nice. Go. So they talk about various odds and ends. Alright. Turns fighting spirit. Ah, so if you're really reckless, she might buy you. Because normally I play it like, I fight on the front lines, but I fight cleverly. And there we go. You're coming with me. How much do I owe you? 8. Okay, there we go. And, yeah, we get no choice of what to do, but that is basically the prologue over. Now, the reason I've kind of played for all this, I'm just going to keep skipping right now, because there's a certain moment I want to get to. We'll have this wonderful introduction to the area. Again, beautiful backgrounds. No clouds, though. This, I mean, I do like the night sky, but yeah, no clouds whatsoever. I know it's supposed to be hot. But once we've done the initial, like, lines, you get to pick which of the quest trees you go down, and this is another reason why the game gets very disjointed. I'll rejoin you when we get there. Now, this is a little bit different. One of the things you can do is you build up friendship with people is to either just take on tasks for them, or have them introduce themselves to you. Friendship in this game, again, doesn't really have much on the plot, and you can have someone who's your enemy and still do nice things to them. They'll go straight back up to neutral after one good task for them. But yes, if they're enemies, you get to do things like spread rumours and try and harm them. If they're friendly, you can basically do like a little events with them and later romance them. And the romance consists of a single little scene and one picture. So if you're looking for adult content, even though there's slight hints of it, and there's some scenes that you probably could consider mild erotica, there's going to be no actual full-on nudity or love scenes. And I'm back. Now, this is what I was talking about. This is sort of the character select of which path you'll go down, and you unlock them one by one. My main gripe about this is you can actually skip these. You have to do a certain amount of them to progress to the next act. But you can skip a good chunk of these if you're just not interested in the character. But overall, I feel that because of their disjointed nature, you can do that without really affecting the story too badly. If you go through the whole thing, it's going to take you maybe 3 to 4 hours to play through all the content, if you're a decently fast reader. The only problem is, if you want to replay all this again, you will find yourself getting bored very quickly, because I have gone down alternative routes in my second playthrough, and so little changes, so little really is affected by your choices, that apart from a character being angry from you and maybe a scenario being solved slightly differently and characters meeting slightly differently, the overall plot just doesn't change and there's very little effect. I did find that there was far more ways to die than I thought there was by acting belligerently, but it's like stupid belligerent. You don't really have the feel of being a proper slave, even though that's what this is kind of marketed towards in terms of its plot. You are a person enslaved, and this is how you survive under your owners, and the various tasks you're given and the challenges you face. But you just seem to be this Mary Sue force of charisma that all these characters, with the slightest prompting, will pretty much love you, even though there will be some confusion. And again, I can't really put my finger on it, but it doesn't really give the promised feel. It's not a bad story, I'll give it that. I was interested to see where it was going, but at the same time, I found there was a lot of flavor text and a lot of fluff that I eventually just grew bored of, and the game became quite repetitive, and I was going through several of the side stories just to make sure I could go on to the next act, and I wasn't going to miss anything important, and I was desperately trying to unlock these emotion cards. If you can pick this up for maybe £1 or £2 and don't mind having a half-written story, then go for it. But I am already struggling to really go into the depths of this without spoiling the story that is there. And honestly, as a visual novel, there's not really that much to comment upon. Art direction, good. Writing, it's a vibrant world where you kind of want to know more about it. However, the story itself is a mix. Certain scenarios, really good fun. Certain characters, interesting. But the interactions with them and such like that, the card system does not have the promise that it had in the demo, and honestly bears really very little use beyond a normal you choose from several answers style of a visual novel. And the fact that there's only really kind of 1 or 2 ways to do a scenario successfully, there's plenty of ways of screwing it up and doing alternatives and mucking things around, but affecting how people like you and things like that, none of it really seems to matter outside of the scenario you are currently in. And with that, I have been called back to work, so I will catch you next time. I hope this has been somewhat informative. I know it's been a bit disjointed in the explanation here, but I must admit, I wanted to cover this, but I was struggling in how to do so. But I look forward to seeing you in the next video.